Okay, good evening everyone. We are now recording. Welcome to week 5 and hope you're all doing well. You and your families are all okay and you're not getting too bored at home. There's been lots of amazing, just lots of ideas for people to keep their children and each other amused at home. I've been keeping track of it. I've got 2 teenagers at home and I'm very concerned that they're going to start to get really bored very soon, especially with the school holidays moving a little bit forward. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure all of you, a lot of you are in a similar situation as to how to keep those young people at home amused. All right. So we're going to be looking about planning as, it's a very important part of curriculum. So we're going to be thinking about children, family policies, frameworks, and curiosities as well. They're all things that we need to think about in planning. So different cultures, contexts, and values of families and communities, they all contribute to this amazing richness of the child's learning experience. And they also inform how we plan our curriculum. So it's important to remember, and we have touched on this before, that no single curriculum document captures all that there is to teaching. So it's really essential that the content is considered alongside a shared philosophy of teaching. So with families, with the community, with the children, with each other, so your colleagues, theoretical frameworks of teaching and learning, and also ethics and values. So your personal ethics and values as a teacher, but also those ethics and values of the families that you will be working with as well. So intentional teaching, it means much more than the intentional interactions between educators and children. So we focused very much on that so far, but intentional teachers, they're intentional with respect to all aspects of the learning environment. So in the first reading from last week, those of you that were able to read it, Taguchi talked about how the image of the child can be lost in the context of curriculum accountabilities. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that, whether you're early childhood, primary or secondary focused, but those curriculum accountabilities. So a skilled educator needs to have a very good knowledge and understanding of the curriculum, of course, but to use it in the context of children and families effectively, that is, I guess, the challenge in some ways. So we need to make sure that the child shapes the curriculum, not vice versa. It's something that we really need to think about in all of our planning, that the child is the focus, the individual child. And that's something that, as early childhood educators, we are very, very much focused on. So as educators as well, we focus daily, we reflect daily on the way we do things. So how we do them, how we do everything in our early years environment, and we need to question, are these decisions best for the children, for the families, and also for our colleagues? So we also need to consider, do these decisions reflect the children and families' life stories? All these curriculum decisions and behaviours, they set the tone and the substance of what happens in the learning environment. So there's some questions on the slide. In whose interests are decisions made? Is it fair? For whose benefit? Why is the environment set up in the way it is? Why is the schedule of the day this way? If we were an infant or the parent of the infant, what would we want? So lots and lots of considerations, and also about the children's perspectives and the parents' perspectives as well. So these choices and decisions, they're major contributors to the children's experiences, their enjoyment in their environment, and of course their outcomes, their learning outcomes. So something that we need to consider. So as we also discussed last week, our decisions around the approaches that we use and the content that we teach are influenced by many environmental factors, and they're also influenced by teachers' interests and expertise. And this is, Alex and I were talking about this earlier. Alex is focusing on how do early years learning environments, or specifically educators, promote children's engagement in STEM. And we were discussing that, you know, to promote a particular area or a focus, it really is going to be dependent on the interest, the passion of the teacher in that area, and also how capable they are and confident they are in that area as well. So STEM is a good example of this, because often if you're not confident in a particular area, then you're not going to be encouraging your students in that way. So, you know, the curriculum is very much influenced by our own interest and our expertise as well. Again, another important area to consider. So, focusing on meaning making. Again, this comes back to our socio-cultural approach. So that recognises that learning doesn't simply reside in the individual, but that it's located in the social world where children live. So knowledge as a social construct, this comes from the writings of Lev Vygotsky. So rather than children learning and teachers imparting knowledge, teachers and children learn together. So they make sense of ideas, and they actually make meanings and understandings together. So this is with the children, with a child and the teacher, but also with the child and their peers as well. So a really important part of the process of, you know, the socio-cultural approach and the process of co-construction is how we engage with our students, how we engage, you know, engaging in dialogue. And I guess it's important to remember that this engagement, the questioning, the development of awe and wonder that actually enables theory making and critical reflection with our students, it's something that's really typical of early childhood. It's something that children do naturally. They, you know, they see the amazing things around them and they want to question it. But unfortunately, this gets lost as we grow up, as we get older. Malaguzzi in the 100 Languages of Children emphasises that pedagogy should not be a prisoner of too much certainty, but instead for educators to be aware of both the relativity and its powers, and the difficulties translating its ideals into practice. Piaget also warned us that the errors and ills of pedagogy come from that lack of balance between scientific data or data collection and its social application. So that that socio-cultural approach, it really does recognise that learning, it doesn't just reside with the individual. It's so much more than that. All right, so curriculum documents, I guess in order to understand curriculum and to utilise it in all of our unique individual learning environments, we really do need to understand the components of the curriculum design. So the rationale and also the outcomes as well. So curriculum frameworks like the Early Years Learning Framework and the Queensland Curriculum Guidelines, they have been similarly developed in countries such as New Zealand, United Kingdom, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. So like in Australia, these countries, they use curriculum as a guide with the educator as central. So as a reader, as a critique, and also as an actor as well. So we really need to think about, are we a slave to the curriculum? You know, again, coming back to that focus on the child as being central. So critiquing the Early Years Learning Framework, for example, it involves us understanding, it involves us questioning and critically examining all aspects. So on the slide are some specific questions that you can pose when unpacking the frameworks. So when you're comparing and contrasting across the documents as well, the different curriculum documents. Some may be more relevant than others, depending on what your specific focus is. I'm going to break down a few of them. Some of them we've already gone through in a lot of detail, and others I think are very much for your own reflection as well. So from our discussions over the last 4 weeks, especially from week 1, you would have a good understanding of why the framework was written. So the research and the subsequent policy and the many reforms that we discussed in that week 1 session. So in terms of the purpose of the framework, it's very much designed, I guess there's 4 points on the slide. They're the 4 main aims that you could unpack and compare and contrast with other curriculum documents. But again, it would depend on your specific focus as well. So basically to inspire conversations, we've gone through these before, to hold high expectations for young children's learning, to communicate a common understanding and language through the 5 learning outcomes. So this understanding and language is something, it's a national understanding now across for all early childhood educators. So being able to discuss the curriculum, we have those 5 learning outcomes now, and to also provide a national broad direction for early childhood educators. So I guess basically that we're all on the same page. But as we know, you know, the curriculum, it's a framework and this is the purpose, but each individual setting is going to use it very much dependent on their specific context. So why is the framework, what does the framework value? Anyone have any thoughts on that? What do you think it is in the framework that is really valued by early childhood educators? Any thoughts? What if we look at the 8 principles within the framework? So what did we have? We had adopting holistic approaches, being responsive to children, planning and implementing learning through play, which is very much an important focus that many of you will be looking at. Those intentional teaching practices, creating physical and social learning environments. So again, that's social context, valuing the cultural and social context of the families as well. So it's about valuing them and making sure that they're very much a part of the learning environment. Another important one was providing for continuity in experiences and enabling children to have that successful transition into school. Again, another focus that many of you will be looking at. And of course, assessing and also monitoring children's learning. So this is important to inform further provision and also to support children in achieving the learning outcomes as well. So I guess those 8 principles are very much the focus, it shows us those core values of the curriculum. So we also need to think about and to consider all of those underlying belief systems. So belief systems, images, perceptions, ideals, assumptions, and contexts. So the visible ones and the invisible. So last week we talked about aspects of the hidden curriculum. So all those intrinsic concepts that are informally and often unintentionally transmitted in our learning environments, so through our own beliefs and understandings. Can anyone remember what some of those were that we talked about last week? Gender stereotypes, do you remember that one? Yeah. We also talked about language, stereotypes, behaviour, attitudes, values, and morals, cultural as well. So all of these are in contrast to the formal curriculum. So all of the planned activities and tasks that children participate in. So those invisible ones are the things that we generally don't, as educators, think about, the kind of gender stereotypes that our choice of resources reveal, or the way we use our language, or our actual behaviour in the classroom, the behaviour that we're modelling, and what we focus on as being important. All of those things, that's the hidden curriculum that as educators we don't often reflect on in our learning environments. So any questions so far? I'm not going to go through all of these. Does anyone have any comments on any of them in terms of what they're actually focusing on? Something that might be particularly relevant for you? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm happy to share, Angela.
Yeah.
Not what I'm focusing on, but just a comment about, the visible and invisible and, the early years or other curriculum frameworks. Sometimes I feel like the visible curriculum gets in the way of, all of those things that we should be doing or want to be doing. And I feel like, I know a lot of the teachers I work with, they very much are reflecting all the time on, the invisible curriculum, however, feel like their hands are tied by the formal, delivery of Australian curriculum and this heavy assessment schedule, even in prep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so. But I guess as educators, we need to try and find a balance between that. And we can, use the curriculum, but I don't think we need to be constrained by it. And we can actually, the use of a balance of pedagogies to inform that curriculum, I think that's where the answer is, you know, to make sure that we do use a balance of approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very hard to do sometimes, but when you do see it working, it's, you know, we say it's where the magic happens.
That's right. And, you know, I think as educators, we're often too scared to experiment and to try new things, to think, you know, thinking that they're going to fail, and they may very well fail. It may not work, but you have to keep trying new things to actually see if they do work and if they suit you and they suit your context as well. And, you know, and I guess a big thing is if parents, to educate parents as well about what you're doing so that they can be understanding and hopefully accepting of a variety of approaches rather than just that explicit teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do believe, you know, from my experience in the early years, it's very much about communicating what you're doing with parents, like to make all of those amazing practices that you're doing very, very visible. Okay. So, and I guess to really make this effective, we have to think about the children's role in planning in the curriculum. So involving children in planning, so through encouraging them to follow those emerging interests, making sure their intentions are clearly understood and embraced by educators, by all educators, that these approaches are something that are used throughout the learning environment by all educators, making sure that there are opportunities that students and children have opportunities to reflect on their play and their learning with an adult, so that we actually talk about the processes of their play and what they're doing. So we unpack it with them so they can understand what they're learning through what they're doing, what they're playing as well. And also importantly, finally, allowing choice in how they respond to ideas, to objects, and questions that are introduced by the teacher. So really, you know, looking at how they learn. Are they visual learners? Are they kinesthetic learners? So really making sure you have a good understanding of those students and give them lots of choices in their environment. So our role in doing this, as we've talked before, to facilitate children having this control in their learning, we really need to be flexible and adaptable. So we need to use a range of teaching and learning approaches. And I guess most importantly, that I see lacking in so many of our learning environments is the need to see children as being capable and competent. And I guess to do this, to do all of these, we really need to be active listeners and communicators. So to really engage with students, get down to their level and really listen to what they're saying. You know, we can listen, but are we actually hearing? And in the very, very busy day that we have in our learning environments, often we just don't hear what our students are saying. And that makes it very difficult to expand on their understandings and to use those open-ended questions and to encourage that inquiry. So without listening and hearing what they're saying, we're not going to be able to, you know, encourage them further. All right, so Fleet and Patterson. So they suggest that traditional style planning formats, so those formats based on filling in the boxes, they may actually constrain our emphasis on the individual child and that opportunity for inquiry-based learning. So this is outlined on the two next slides. So I like this. It's an example that emphasises curriculum planning based on filling in the boxes. So with activities, no doubt based on the developmental capabilities of the students, so fine motor, gross motor, cognitive, social and emotional. So this is really important, but it shouldn't be our only emphasis. So for me, when I was an undergraduate, this was the way planning was encouraged. So, you know, filling in those boxes, the, you know, how are we going to assist children with their gross motor skills, with their cognitive, with their social and emotional. And often it was very much based on the whole group as opposed to individual students. So that's in contrast to a different kind of approach to curriculum planning based on, again, children's interests, their current investigations, so with an emphasis on collaborating with families. So really getting to know those children and for the parents to know what's happening in the learning environment and to use them as resources. Again, I was talking with Alexandra about that STEM environment. To use that as an example again, I worked in a prep where we were next to the CSIRO. So, you know, children were very interested in science and I used those parents. I would get them to come in all the time and share their expertise and their understandings with the students. And, you know, you may not have an expertise in a particular area, but you certainly might be able to find someone else. So someone from within the community or even another teacher within the school setting. So very much important that we get those conversations, discussions and interactions with families and the community as well. So just two nice examples, like contrasting examples. Okay, so planning based on multi-dimensional considerations. We call it planning spirals. They open up different ways of thinking and working with children. So again, that strong sense of collaboration, a move away from formulas or very prescriptive ways of planning that I was talking about, you know, the filling in the boxes, the focus on, capabilities is important and focusing on student outcomes. But again, I guess looking at starting with those children's interests as well to make sure that we can engage them. Because without engaging them and without encouraging that love of learning, we're really not going to be able to get anywhere. So I guess I touched on this a little bit earlier. The speed and the pace of the day, as well as the time slots organised within it, all of these things can affect how children feel in their learning environment. As we know, children get frustrated when they're rushed and they get bored when they're insufficiently engaged. So we need to, again, consider the visual, tactile, auditory resources. We need to consider that all of these resources reflect the children's life experiences, their understandings and their interests. Again, you know, using experts, provocations, parents as resources, those sorts of things. And I guess we've touched on this before, the environment as a third teacher. So an integral part of the community, of the curriculum is the environment. So thinking about what learners, thinking about the environment from the learner's perspective and how it's working for them and are they actually represented in this environment. So I guess we can do this by putting ourselves in the learning spaces, like something as simple as lying on the ground looking up as babies do. Are the resources child height? Posters and children's artwork displayed at child level. So often I walk into kindergartens and all of the artwork is displayed up high. So it's not for the children, it's for the parents. And so, we really need to think about how we display everything in our learning environments as well. Are the spaces inviting? Do they encourage inquiry? And I think it's also important to remember that the learning environment, it actually says a lot about how educators value and view children. So the way materials are displayed, the types of materials that you use, it all says a lot about what your values are as a teacher. So I guess the challenge is to be fully understanding of the curriculum content while teaching intentionally and also purposefully. And then, of course, with the interests, needs and strengths of the children central to all our decision making. So I guess it's really three basic things: understanding the curriculum, understanding the students and using those intentional teaching practices with that focus on the children's interests, needs and strengths. But if only it was that simple, hey? There's so much more that really is involved, and all of our learning environments are so different. And I guess that's why as designers of curriculum in these spaces, it really needs to be purposeful and really well thought out. So I want you to just now have a little think about what we've talked about in this lecture. And I want you to think about what it means for you. And that could be in your professional practice at the moment, or it could be in terms of ideas that you're going to take on board for your essay. Any comments? Or it could also have to do with the readings as well that we've, and the clips that you were there for you to have a look at this week. I know some of you have moved on to focusing solely on your essay, your assessment task, and that's completely understandable at this point. So what have we got? A bit over 2 weeks, I think, left now until your first assessment is due. Anyone want to share though anything specific that came out of this lecture that you found significant? Or it could even be out of previous lectures. Who would like to share?
I'll have a go if you like.
That's Meg?
Oh, Sabrina.
Sabrina, okay.
I think it was last week's video, but one of the things, it's not part of my assignment, but one of the things that I'm really want to get more knowledge about is how to incorporate those like Indigenous perspectives and stuff into my practice when I do become a kindergarten teacher. And last week's must have been the video that was on was really, really interesting. And the way, I think it was the lady at the end, she was talking about how she still follows all the ELF outcomes and stuff, but the way that they interpret that, she was talking about, they're looking at safety and, you wouldn't cross the river in this particular spot because the crocodiles are there. And
yeah,
it was just really interesting to see like an authentic way of how she incorporates those perspectives within her planning and brings it into the curriculum. And yeah, it was really, it was one of those things where, she's like, we all get to the same outcomes, but it's her interpretation of this and how she can draw in the culture and the things that are relevant to her students into that. So yeah, that was really, I really enjoyed that video for that reason.
That's a really good point, because it is all about making sure that our curriculum reflects the life stories of our students, isn't it? It's and you know, there could be many life stories within the one learning setting, many different cultures, many different socioeconomic areas. So it's important that we really do take all of those considerations, into our planning. So yeah, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. So I want you to make sure that in terms of moving into your completing your assignment, that you do use QUT, the readings. There are lots of things, lots of articles and things that will be useful just from within the unit readings. You look carefully at with your data research, like using the HiQ. And as I said last week, there are, the Student Success Group have Zoom sessions that you can attend. So there's one, what did I say, which was it, Thursdays of this week? I sent you an email. Anyway, check your emails. There, each week there is a session that, so there was one this week and there'll be one next week as well, that you can join in, and they can actually, I've actually sent them a copy of our task sheet. So they're fully understanding of what the assessment task involves. So if you have any specific questions about data searching, which is probably the most important thing at this point, they'll really be able to help you with that on an individual basis. So there'll be time for you to actually ask specific questions as well. So please make sure, if you are struggling in any way, that you join that session. And I know some of you have already have gone into the library and participated in support sessions as well. They're still available, so the library is still open. And then this is the one that I was talking about before, that's now on our Blackboard site. So supporting your move to online learning. I would imagine that this is the way things are going to be for a while now. So for those of you, our wonderful internal students who have had to move over to our Zoom platform, please have a look, click on that resource, and it can take you to, just to give you, and also those of you that have been studying externally for a while, that may help you as well. Some tools and technologies and some advice as well. Okay. So as always, I've got the references there as well, some, to assist you if there was anything specific that you found noteworthy for your particular task, your focus, you know where to go. All right, so I think I might head off, but what I will do is I'm going to, again, I will stop the share of the, and I will, can everyone see the Brady Bunch view? Yeah. Okay. So I might go and, I'm going to go and have a glass of wine, I think. And you can have a chat to each other as we do. And especially in these times, you might want to, our community of practice, you might want to have a little chat about how you're going with things at the moment, not necessarily assignment based, but I'm going to stop the recording and leave it to you for a little while.